Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mark Bell's Power Project podcast, hosted by Mark Bell and co-hosted by Nsima, Inyang, and myself, Andrew Zaragoza. Today, we have a really, really interesting podcast with Brad Marshall. Brad Marshall has done a bunch of experiments, mainly on himself, in regards to what he called the Croissant diet. Now, I know that's going to catch a lot of attention right off the bat, but please make sure you guys understand that he is a highly, he has all the credentials necessary to run this type of experiment on himself. He admits when he doesn't understand something. He doesn't try to lie and pretend that he knows everything. But what you guys will find really interesting is that as soon as he started doing this diet, he started losing inches around his waist within a couple of days. And then he was having meals upwards of 6,000 calories and still losing weight. So naturally, us being a bunch of meatheads, we asked him, like, is this a cool option for somebody trying to lean out, like, bodybuilder status? And Mark wants to remind everybody that before you completely turn this off and write everything this guy says off, he wants to remind you guys that everybody thought Dr. Atkins was also pretty damn crazy. So again, there's some really good information in here, and you guys will soon find out whether or not Mark is going to actually attempt this style of diet. Before I get out of your guys' way, I just want to remind everybody that markbell.com is still offering a free 30-day trial as long as you register and sign up and all that good stuff before the end of June. There is now two different types of tiers of membership. There is the standard one, and then there's also now a premium side of the website where you can actually see what Team Super Training is doing, the full program that the members of our gym actually get to receive and get to do. You guys can do that as well. And really cool feature, you get to put points up on a virtual scoreboard. It's a way to keep you motivated, a way to keep yourself accountable. Again, that's at markbell.com, and it is 100% free right now, but you have to sign up before the end of June. And lastly, if you guys missed our call-in show, please make sure you text, you can text anything to 206-737-7369 to be notified the next time we do a call-in show. We had a lot of fun. We took calls. We had Jesse Burdick on answering some of those questions that our callers had, and we have had an absolute blast, and we really want you guys to be a part of the next one. So please don't miss out. Again, that is 206-737-7369. The next time we go live and we're taking calls, you guys will get a text message notification right on your phone, and you can click there, and then you guys will be, it'll direct you straight to the YouTube video. And then, of course, on that YouTube video, when we open up the fan lines, you guys can give us a ring. That's it for me. So, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this show with Brad Marshall.
I'm ready. Ready, Freddy.
Are you sure you're ready?
I'm ready with the spaghetti.
Did it end up on your sweater already?
Mm-hmm.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about these fats and carbs, mixing them together. We've talked a lot on this podcast about sometimes that combination leading you to overeat. And again, I don't think any one of us thinks that necessarily that if you were to eat fat and carbs together, that it would necessarily make you fat, or if that you're to eat fat by itself or protein by itself, carbs by itself, or if you're to mix all three in one meal. I think we know enough now. We could say with the most certainty that we don't believe any of that will make you fat, but it's the accumulation of food over a long period of time and maybe not moving around enough, maybe not having the metabolism to handle the amount of food that you eat, not having enough muscle mass on your body. That could be kind of impeding people's progress when it comes to losing fat. But today we're talking to Brad Marshall, and he's going to talk to us about his croissant diet, which he'll explain, and he'll tell you guys as well. It's a little gimmicky on purpose. There's nothing in particular about a croissant that's going to be all that different, I don't think, from some other foods. But it's just mixing starches and fats. What I'm interested to see is, like, based on his theories, information, it sounds like it won't make you any fatter, but will it help you get lean? And he references France and the people in France and stuff like that, and how they how they live and how they look. When I was in France, I just saw people smoke cigarettes and drink wine and occasionally eat some cheese and some bread. So I don't know. I don't know what their diet really looks like, but I didn't see a lot of eating going on. I also didn't see anybody jacked either. Not that there's nobody in France that's not jacked, but for the most part, I didn't see anybody that looked like super built or super lean. They just weren't fat, so that'll be interesting to kind of discuss that. Does he think that this method and having this knowledge will help like repel obesity, or does he think that you can maybe take your training to the next level with some of these theories and concepts? It'd be interesting to find out.
Well, France also doesn't have American portion sizes. I mean, I think that's the bigger deal, but we'll learn more from him. But yeah, I was thinking yesterday when
we got some portion sizes over here.
Yeah, I was thinking about the croissant guy, and I was just like, well, why not bagels? How about this? But I see. I guess just the flaky goodness. That's all.
It sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it does.
There's always a catch too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's going to turn out that his croissant is actually just a steak, and he just imagines he's worked on his mind so much that he's actually just eating Piedmontese all the time.
or it flakes so much that you lose so much of the croissant that you just don't eat it all.
You have to eat it in the car. It breaks apart. You have to eat it in the car is the trick. And then it just gets all over your shirt.
To vacuum it all up. You don't even eat the whole croissant.
So what about when a croissant's in a bag and it has all that grease on the outside of it? That's when you know you did something. Oh, John Cena just fell down.
Oh, no.
Sad.
Then the bag becomes see-through. That's really cool. Like the paper bag,
Yeah.
Oh, God.
What'd you eat yesterday, Andrew? While you're coughing, trying to reach for breath.
I know. So yesterday, I had more Monster Mash. It was amazing, and I've been using the Piedmontese ground beef. And that's
the stuff.
It's funny.
Did you play the song, the Monster Mash song?
No, I did not. Oh. No. But it was funny because somebody had asked me a while back, like, aren't you tired of eating Monster Mash and da-da-da? And then when I went off of it, I really craved it, and then now that I'm having it this way, I'm like, dude, this is like on the H&L. Like there's something a little different about the Piedmontese ground beef. Not sure exactly what that is, but for whatever reason, it tastes incredible. And then I started adding mustard to it. I don't know if that sounds insane. But it tastes great.
These people, you sound very childish right now, Andrew. 3 years from now, you're gonna look back at that and say, "I can't believe I said that." I'm just kidding. No. Hey, man, whatever gets you through it, right? Whatever gets you through it. And I think bodybuilders have recognized this, so they made like steak shakes, and they made the chicken shake, and I don't know if people know this. I don't know if they know their history on these shakes. I don't know who first brought it about, but I think the first I ever heard about it was from a guy named Derek Poundstone, who was a United States strongman competitor, and he was like in the running for being able to snatch the victory away from like Mariusz Pudzianowski and some of those formidable strongmen from years ago when the United States couldn't figure out how to win a strongman competition for a little while. But Derek Poundstone started it all out with a tuna shake. And you know what happened? His mercury levels like went through the roof. He like started not feeling good and stuff. And his wife's like, "Hey, do you think it's you think maybe it's those shakes?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "It can't be that." He's like, "That's just protein."
Oh my god!
And he got like his blood levels checked, and his mercury was all out of whack. But you're not going to get high mercury from these Piedmontese cows, I don't think.
Nope. And you definitely don't need to blend them up in a shake to get all your protein in. That's for sure.
These people too, these Piedmontese people, they're serious. They're like building out some really extraordinary buildings. I saw some pictures of it the other day.
Damn.
They have I don't know if you guys got sent the New York strips that are aged.
No.
I got to have them send those out to you. I didn't know what they were because they came in a box and it just didn't say anything on it. Mm-hmm. But I knew they were special because they came in their own box. Everything else was wrapped up a certain way, and this came in its own box. But it didn't have any information in there. And I knew they were something special, so I had my brother-in-law cook them up. He knows how to cook like there's no tomorrow. So I said, "Hey, man, I don't want to mess these up. I'm going to have you mess with these things." And I don't know what he did. I think he cooked it in the oven for a little while, and I think he threw it on the cast iron for a little while. Mm-hmm. But it was some of the best steak I've ever had, and it was just
wow.
I mean, we were all just losing our minds. He used some sort of mushrooms on it too. I can't remember what they were called, but they got us all really high, and we enjoyed ourselves.
Nice. I like it.
There we go.
So if you guys want...
No, not those kind of mushrooms.
Yeah. For more information on Piedmontese, please head over to Piedmontese.com. That's Piedmontese.com. At checkout, enter promo code Power Project for 25% off your order. And if your order is $99 or more, you get free 2-day shipping. Let me send this email out.
You're a little bit,
there he goes.
You're a little bit like a John Cena.
How so?
Nsima. John Cena is the annoying guy that everyone hates because he's jacked, he's good looking, he's smart, he's strong. He's just like everything everybody wants to be, but they just can't be, no matter how hard they try. Well, and no matter how much trend someone takes, no matter how many books someone reads, they can't catch up.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
But Cena, where Cena's different is like, for some reason, his wrist is like the size of your fist. I don't know why. I don't know why he's like that. I don't know with the growth hormone or something that's going on. Or,
he has amazing hair. What happened?
He's got some hair that made a comeback. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He had it real short for a long time.
Do you know what he was like in school by any chance?
Yeah. So, I didn't know him then. I knew him like early 20s or mid 20s or so. But our buddy Spray, who we've had on the podcast before, I always forget Spray's real name.
Me too.
Known him for 20 years. And, I was like, yeah, Spray.
Spray.
Some gross nickname that he got from running around naked at a party or something like that. Anyway, yeah, so Spray tells a story. Rob McIntyre, there we go. Rob McIntyre tells a story of like when Cena came to their school the first time. John was in public school, and then he switched over to a private school, and he was one of the kids that was able to be in the private school because he was willing to work. His family didn't have the money to send him to a private school. I don't know what the situation was on why they felt like they needed to get him to this particular school. Maybe it was the area they lived in or something. I'm not sure. So he went to this private school, and he's there for just a couple of days, and everyone starts talking about how John Cena's at the school. And people are like, well, who the fuck is John Cena? They're like, well, he's going to speak today in the... we're going to have like an assembly. That's the coolest thing when you're in school and you have an assembly. It's like a reason to get out of class. Yeah. And I don't know what grade this is, but I'm just imagining it's like 9th or 10th grade or something like that, or maybe even a little earlier. I'm not sure. But they're like, yeah, he's going to give this speech. And John gives this speech how, he's new at the school, but he wants everyone to recognize that everyone's similar, and that everyone should be striving to understand that they're the future of America. And he said it was wild because it was like actually a really cool speech, even though he's only been there for like 3 days.
John Cena's always been John Cena.
He's always been John Cena. Yep. What's up, Brad?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Yo.
We're just over here down in some croissants, man, in hopes that we'll get jacked and tan.
Nice.
Hey, it's
nice. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great to have you on the show. And I was made aware of your content through Ron Penna. I'm not sure if you know who Ron Penna is, but he sold Quest Nutrition recently, and he's one of the original co-founders of Quest Nutrition.
Yeah. No, Ron is actually a big supporter of especially my new project. So,
of course you're aware of him. I forgot he put us in an email thread together. But when he sent it over, I'm like, who is this guy that's eating croissants? What's going on with this? So, if you don't mind, maybe just kind of start out by giving us some of your background, because I think you have an interesting background, all the different things that you've studied and your education, and then now it sounds like you're very much into food and cooking and kind of a culinary side of things, which I think is interesting as well.
Yeah, and so I went to Cornell for molecular biology, and so I have a degree. I did cancer research for a couple of years at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and from there I worked at the Drosophila Genome Project out in Berkeley, and so I have a science background, but while in New York, I went to the French Culinary Institute. I've always loved cooking, and I love farmers markets, and So over the years, I really
off,
got more interested.
By the way, just so the audience is aware, you just rattled off some of the most prestigious colleges and culinary institutes in the entire country.
Yeah, and so I was doing science, and I was doing some computer science really at Berkeley. But my passion really is more, I just love food and culinary. And so anyways, at some point I kind of left the academic world and I moved back to upstate New York, where I'm originally from. And I bought a farm and started raising pigs.
Oh.
Right. And so that's kind of where that went. And that, so I've been doing that for a long time. And over the years, just learning more and more about pigs and the history and how they've been fed and how that's changed. I've just, I've learned a tremendous amount about that. And so that kind of like segued into, the ideas behind, the Croissant diet that I did. And that was heavily influenced by a blog called Hyperlipid. Are you guys familiar with the blog Hyperlipid at all?
No, I'm not. So writing it down.
So Hyperlipid is a fantastic blog, but it is not for the faint of heart. It's full of jargon. And it's all about what happens in the mitochondria. So like if you don't, it's kind of like inaccessible if you don't have a pretty serious biology background.
Yeah.
So it's a tough read, but he really has introduced and kind of popularized this idea that I wrote a blog series on last June of 2019 called the ROS theory of obesity. And that means reactive oxygen species, which are like free radicals. And I'm not going to dig into it right now because I'm trying to give the overview. But basically the idea is that the type of fats that you are oxidizing, that your mitochondria are actually eating, makes a huge difference as to your insulin sensitivity. And that affects a lot of sort of like energy balance through the whole body. And basically the argument boils down to this: if you eat a lot of really saturated fat, certain tissues in your body become very insulin resistant. And the one that becomes the most insulin resistant is your abdominal fat. And so the idea is if you eat a lot of very saturated fat, what is insulin? Insulin is a signal. Insulin does a lot of things, but one of the things that insulin is a signal to store energy. And so if you can specifically make your abdominal fat insulin resistant, it won't store energy. And so this type of insulin resistance is very different from, someone with type 2 diabetes, which has this sort of long-term pathological type of insulin resistance. This is like a very specific targeted way to like target, mostly abdominal fat, but other fat stores. And so that those tissues, instead of, instantly starting to absorb and take on energy once they see the signal from insulin, they're actually going to say, you know what, I'm full. I don't need any more energy right now. I'm just going to stay here and I'm just going to happily keep burning fat rather than storing fat. And so that's the idea. And if you read on my blog, The ROS Theory of Obesity, it talks a lot about these studies done in mice. They've done several studies in mice where mice given a high stearic acid diet, which is a mixed diet of both, fat and carbohydrate. Those mice remain very lean, doing the thing that we're all told not to do, which is to combine starch and fat. And so that's what gave me the idea for the Croissant diet was I looked at what the mice were eating and I was like, well, that to me as a chef, that sounds like a croissant, right? And so, obviously, the croissant diet's kind of cheeky, right? It's a stunt, but it's also, I just wanted to point out that this idea that, starch is always bad, which I think is what we have. And this idea that you can never mix fat and starch together, I'm not sure that's right. And so I also love the history of food. Obviously I went to French culinary school, so I know a lot about French cuisine and the history of French food. And the thing is, on my blog, I write a lot about traditional diets and what people have been eating. But if you look at France in 1970, let's say, and I picked that time for a specific reason, but at that point, the French were still not really eating any vegetable oil. They were definitely eating lots of croissants. They were eating dessert. They were eating lots of calories, like over 3,000 calories a day per capita, lots of butter, lots of cream, lots of beef, lots of pork fat, along with lots of white flour and potatoes, And if you look at photos from France in the 1970s, everyone is lean. Like, I have a picture on my blog of an airport Cena in Paris in 1970, and there's like hundreds of people in the photo, and like there's no obese people in the whole, you can see all the profiles of all the people, and like you're like, where are all the obese people? If that was an American airport, a third of the people or more would be obese. And so you're like, how? And so I got into the low carb. I did my first low carb diet back when Atkins was big in like 2001 or 2002, something like that. And so for a long time, I've been in the kind of keto community. I cheated a lot. So I'm not saying I've been consistent with it, but for a long time I've had in my head that the best way to lose weight is to do a low carb diet. But I've always struggled because I also know that people, like the French diet, that's not what they did, and they weren't obese. And so I've always kind of like struggled to reconcile those two facts. Like I didn't know how to put that together. And so, last year I gained a lot of weight. I had a lot of belly fat specifically. And that's when I started reading Hyperlipid again. It's a blog I've read a lot over the years. And I started reading it again, and I went through it all, and I learned all of his jargon. There's a lot of jargon, so that I could actually, really read the articles and kind of start to understand them. And that's what, and I had done, in the early part of that year, I had tried a keto diet, and I tried carnivore for a little while, and I really wasn't, I wasn't getting the same results of weight loss as I did as a 25-year-old, as I was as a 43-year-old, and so that's when I came up with the idea of just doing this diet, and instead of thinking about the carb angle, thinking really hard about the types of fats and the amounts of fats. And so I started eating this diet that, yes, I was using starch as basically a binder, as a vehicle to consume this highly saturated fat. And like my waistline started to change like in a matter of days.
Can you give us some examples of like the meals that you would be eating?
Sure. So, in the beginning, I was literally making croissants.
Okay.
So what I did was I realized, the mice in the diet were eating stearic acid, it's the long chain saturated fat. It's in beef fat, it's in chocolate, it's in like a lot of things. Almost all foods have some stearic acid, but it's more concentrated in things like beef and yeah. And so what I was doing is I was making classic French croissants, except I was replacing a lot of the butter with just pure stearic acid that I bought from like a lab. So this was like really, really, really saturated fat.
Wow.
Like more than you can get from any natural sources. But it was just a classic French croissant. and I was making sandwiches. So I was eating like 2 of these croissant sandwiches a day, and pretty big sandwiches. And I'm a wine drinker, so I would drink wine at night, and that was kind of it. And
so 2 croissant sandwiches a day. Just clarifying that's kind of what you would eat.
That's about what it was. And I was kind of alternating back and forth between, like, some days. The other thing about the saturated fat is really satiating. And I think there's physiological reasons for that, which we could talk about. But I sort of started alternating between like 2 meals one day and then 1 meal the next day, because I just wasn't that hungry with all of the stearic acid I was consuming. It's really kind of filling. It's actually kind of like, you're like, wow, that's a thing I've struggled with my whole life, is satiation. It's like at the end of the meal, it's like, I just want to keep eating, you know what I mean? But with that stearic acid, I was just like, wow, okay, no, I'm done. I don't even want any more. And like the idea of like me walking away from a half empty plate is not a thing that's happened a lot of times in my life. So, I was like, all right, this is cool. Something's happening here. Like, this is different.
And have you played with this theory in terms of calories? Like, have you looked into calories at all? Like, did you eat anything other than the 2 sandwiches a day type of thing? And did you record just to gain more information?
I have. And I think, like, I don't believe that I was not like seriously constricting calories at all. I don't think. I mean, so I was drinking wine freely during all of this. And I even cheated a lot the first time, but like, so if I was eating, 2 sandwiches in a day, I have it somewhere. I couldn't tell you, but on those days I was easily consuming 4,000 calories or more, I think. And then maybe 2,000 to 2,500 calories on the alternate days. I actually retested this this past winter. And I haven't published those results yet, only because it was like, it was like a whole there was like, I had left my last job, so I didn't have healthcare. I wanted to get my blood lipid profiles done and a bunch of other data, but my new healthcare turns out didn't kick in until March, and I started in February, and then I came down with this gnarly flu right as I was starting the diet. So my blood sugar numbers were all weird. And then, and then by the end, it was like the coronavirus shut down, and it was just like a series of it's like a series of unfortunate events. So I want to really retrial it this summer with like a lot of data, and really try to understand what's going on with like my blood lipids. I've got this idea that I'm going to I posted another article in March when I was on the kind of the second month of the retrial, and then I had started the diet in early February. I initially, just like before, I lost like 3 inches off of my, like the fattest part of my stomach within, I don't know, a week or 2. And then it kind of plateaued a little bit over the second half of February. And so that's when I was like, I think I need to like really re-up the stearic acid. And so I wrote this article called Stearic Acid Macrodosing, where I like made a meal, and I literally, sorry, my earphone is giving me problems. I calculated like the meal was basically a pile of French fries, and then I did like fried chicken and batter, right?
That sounds amazing.
And I weighed, it's good. And so I took I made the stearic acid and butter mix, and weighed the pot, fried everything, weighed it all out, weighed the oil afterwards, and I knew the approximate percentage of saturated fat was in there, so that I actually knew kind of exactly the number of calories of saturated fat that I'd eaten in that meal. And it was a lot. It was like close to 100 grams, I think, of just stearic acid and palmitic acid, the other long chain saturated fat. And so it was like, that was a lot. And then And then, so I ate that huge meal, and I think it was easily, that was like 6,000 calories or something. And then, including the wine, that's an easy way to get more calories in. And so then the follow-up article to that is called Wine Fasting, because then what I did was the next day I didn't eat any solid food, but I drank wine. And then, over that 48 hours, the first time I did it, I lost something like 9 pounds. And of course, some of that is some of that I'm sure is like water weight or whatever, the sugar or glycogen and other things. But I also lost, like 3/4 of an inch off my waist in 48 hours. And the concept is that huge meal of saturated fat gets your abdominal cells to actually release energy rather than storing it. And it allows you to fast because you're not hungry, and it kind of kicks the body into fat burning mode. There's another really interesting article that I reference in the ROS theory of obesity where they gave volunteers these shakes, and it's like a smoothie. It's like a fruit smoothie basically. And one of the shakes had, I think, like 24 or 28 grams of stearic acid in it. And they basically put the volunteers on a vegan diet for like 2 days, and then they gave them a shake either with the stearic acid or without. And so they drank the stearic acid, and then within hours, what happened is their mitochondria actually fused together. So the mitochondria actually changed their physical configuration due to the stearic acid, because there's low-level signaling happening, which is causing them to fuse, which is causing them to actually ramp up their metabolism. And another thing that can happen is this thing called mitochondrial uncoupling. So a mitochondria is like a little battery, and as you digest your food, it's basically pumping, they call it pumping protons, but the outer part of the mitochondria gets positively charged, and the inside membrane is negatively charged. So it's like a little battery with a positive and negative terminal. And there's this protein, it actually spins. It's like a rotor. It's crazy. But as the protons run back down through, because they're the positive charge and they want to go back to the negative charge, it spins this thing, and that's what actually makes ATP, which is the fuel that most of our body reactions run on. But if you are creating too many, and we haven't talked about what the ROS actually are yet, but if you're creating a lot of them, what will happen is your mitochondria will uncouple. And so this other protein called uncoupling protein 1 will insert itself into the membrane, and the protons will just run back through without creating any ATP. And so what happens? So when your mitochondria are uncoupled, you're literally just burning off calories as heat. You're not storing or making use of any of that. And so anecdotally on Twitter, etc., I've had a lot of people tell me that, like, yeah, when I eat stearic acid, I just get hot. Like my body temperature rises. I feel like physically hot because this uncoupling is happening. I mean, presumably because the uncoupling is happening.
So does a lot of this? So does a lot of it come down to using stearic acid specifically in meals or certain saturated
so
fats?
That's a really interesting question. So and this is an ongoing debate and question, and I don't have the answer. What I really think is it's long chain saturated fats. The other major one that's in a lot of foods is palmitic acid. And the only difference between the two of them is stearic acid is 18 carbons long and palmitic acid is 16 carbons long. So, but they're both doing the same thing. And there's some enzymes that recognize one or the other one specifically. And there's a lot of physiology there. Some people think that there is something very special about stearic acid. I know that Peter, the author of the blog Hyperlipid, does not think is less sure that there's anything specifically unique to stearic acid, and that palmitic acid might work just as well. So that's I'm not sure, but I can't say that long chain saturated fat in general is what kind of makes, if the ROS theory of obesity is indeed correct, it's because you're eating lots of long chain saturated fats and also minimizing the number of unsaturated fats.
Yeah, I'd like to mention there's some people that are listening right now who are like, this guy's totally full of shit, and people are falling off. I want people to stick around. I want people to pay attention to this, because I want people to understand that, they used to think that Dr. Atkins was crazy as well, and there's a lot of people like yourself that end up finding things that can help people. Overall, I think the goal is almost always similar. I think the goal is to always try to find foods that are satiating enough to keep people that struggle with their body weight to be able to just have some type of control over their diet. I mean, food is downright maddening. It has a spell on us. And it's for those people that have been addicted to food, they know exactly what I'm talking about. I myself used to wake up in the middle of the night and just smash my pantry and just eat everything that was, anything in sight, like I was a bear. And it just created a lot of bad habits. And I did that for many years. There's a lot of people that struggle with their food on a day-to-day basis. And some of the stuff that you're mentioning, it sounds very familiar to me when somebody talks about fiber or when somebody talks about protein leveraging. I mean, we know how effective. There's so much research on protein leveraging and what it can do. I know it's very foreign for people to hear, yeah, I think you can eat croissants and be fine, and I think you can eat these things and be fine. But truly what you're saying is, I have found something that for me, it feels like when I eat this way, it helps me gain control over my diet. And so somebody that's listening to this, I want them to understand the fact that you might be able to go the croissant route. That might be super effective, but you also might be able to put some butter on your steak and have a baked potato with it. Would that work? And it's not as exciting, but would that work in a similar fashion, do you think?
Yeah. And I want people to understand that I'm not really recommending that people just eat croissants. I did it because I wanted to show that, sure, for a lot of people, carbohydrates are a huge game changer, but it's not the only thing. This fat ratio, I think, really matters, and I don't think it's been emphasized enough. So my goal in doing the croissant diet wasn't really for everyone to run out and start eating croissants. Although it's fun to do that. And the idea that you can do that is great, right? So that's cool. But really what I wanted to emphasize is that perhaps this fat ratio, this polyunsaturated to saturated fat ratio, is a much overlooked contributor to body weight and in fact the types of where your body gains it. So I actually, I make a product which is basically called, well, I guess it's just called Fire in a Bottle, or stearic acid butter oil. But it's basically it's mostly butter, and it's got like the 20% additional stearic acid on top of it, which is about, stearic acid has a high melting point. It's like 170 degrees. So it's like hard candle wax. So you can only add so much until you're literally just like eating like wax lips, remember those? So the butter oil is something that you can actually just melt and, like you say, put it over your steak and eat it that way. And I think that can go a long way to like aiding satiation. So there's different ways to use it. But I will say this, starch is a really good vehicle for consuming a lot of stearic acid. So that's kind of like where the starch is actually helpful in that sense. Like if you're going to go on a long fast, a great way to do it is to start by eating a lot of stearic acid. It kind of like kicks everything off. And I do want to talk about, one of the things I talk about a lot on my blog is like, and I've already brought it up, is the traditional French diet. And that's something where, if you look at what people in France in 1970 were eating, it was starch, butter, cream, beef, and lard from barley finished hogs, basically. And that last part is important, what the pigs ate. And they were lean. And the only real thing, back then they were already eating, the French loved dessert. They were eating, like 400 calories a day of sugar back then. They were eating more than 3,000 calories a day overall. And they were lean, and they were eating, like I say, baguettes, white flour, plenty of it. And so the only real thing that's changed in the French diet is that, one, they now are adding liquid oils, mostly in the form of sunflower seed oil, and they've changed from barley finished pork to a lot more corn finished pork. And so when you feed animals corn oil, that's what their fat becomes made out of, And so the French have had two ways that polyunsaturated fats have entered their diet. One is directly through, added sunflower seed oil, and the other one is indirectly through changing how they feed their livestock. And so, and now in France, obesity rates are rising just like they are everywhere else. And so to me, that's like, when I think about, the sort of root causes of obesity, like in diabetes, and where do they start? I am more and more every day starting to be convinced that the root cause is this change in dietary fat, and that is ultimately what kind of screws up your enzyme systems and your metabolic balance. And then once you're out of whack, then like, I'm not sure if you can sort of put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And so I've been thinking a lot about this analogy of like, all right, we know that if you remove carbohydrate from your diet, that helps a lot of people lose weight. But it doesn't necessarily mean that was the initial thing that caused the weight gain or the diabetes. And I like to use an analogy of like, it's like with a ketogenic diet. They were initially made for what do you call
seizures?
People who have seizures.
Right. Yep. Epileptic seizures.
Epilepsy, yeah. And so, we know that a very ketogenic diet can treat seizures. And so that's like, you remove all the carbohydrates and you remove a lot of proteins to get ketones very high. That will treat seizures. But that doesn't necessarily mean, but we wouldn't say that the cause of seizures are dietary carbohydrate and protein, right? So removing those treats it, but that doesn't mean that those things are the root cause. And I think we might have a situation with starch and vegetable oil where the addition of these polyunsaturated fats are the thing that starts your metabolism going in the wrong direction. And then later you can, that gets your insulin all out of whack. And then later you can sort of fix some of it by removing the carbohydrate, because now you've just stopped producing insulin, right? The carbohydrate stimulates a lot of insulin. So now you've changed the insulin part of the equation. But I really think that the thing that gets your metabolism out of whack in the first place was actually the vegetable oil.
How do you think like dosages play into this? Like how many carbohydrates, how much of this acid are you trying to get? And then kind of in addition to that, is grass-fed beef have any amplification of this type of fat?
Sure. So I've only everybody's metabolism obviously is going to be different. Like how much, and people ask me all the time, well, how much stearic acid do I need? And I don't know. What I can say is that in the milkshake, the banana milkshake study where they ate the 24 grams of stearic acid in one shot, that was enough to get their mitochondria to fuse. So that's a good starting point. But obviously, like I'm not trying to be a diet guru. When I was doing my stearic acid macrodosing, which was incredibly effective, I was consuming like 70 to 100 grams of stearic and palmitic acid. So, so that's a lot. I mean, that's 900 calories or 1,000 calories just from the fat in that single meal. So, I don't know what to I would say, you know, like with anything else, people are going to have to try it and see what works for them and monitor. What I tell people though is, don't just rely on the scale. Get a tape measure and watch how your waistline is changing, because that might be the first place that you notice. That might be the first place that you notice a difference. It really does. In the studies that I got the idea from, the mice fed the stearic acid have like no abdominal fat, like none. Like you almost can't even see it in some of the pictures. You know, they like dissect the mice and then they show the internal fat pads, and they're like non-existent in this stearic acid fed mice.
How do you think somebody could use this to, you know, get leaner? Like, let's say it's somebody like, you know, I know we're talking kind of more specifically about people that are heavy, people that are overweight, but what about the guy that, you know, he's 20 pounds away from being able to see some abs or something like that? How do you think someone can utilize maybe this protocol?
Yeah, I mean, I would say to try doing a meal that's very high in saturated fat, you know, and it doesn't have to be. There's also, if you're a vegan or something, you could do it with cocoa butter. Like cocoa butter is a great source of stearic acid. It's got a ton of it. So, you know, I would say to do whatever you need to do to consume a ton of stearic acid, and then go from that right into a fast, you know, whether that's an intermittent fast or a longer one, and just see if you can, like, you know, literally just kick into that kind of fat burning mode and just run with it for a while.
Do they take their calories into account, like the total calories that they're eating into account? Because I'm just thinking about this from an application point of view. And if I was just someone and I was like, okay, well, that's a lot of fat, and I'm already eating, let's just arbitrarily say 2,500 calories, right? And I'm already eating 100 grams of fat a day. Now, what do? Do I add that 100 grams on top of the 100 grams I'm eating and keep my calories the same? Do I substitute 50 grams and have another 50 grams of stearic acid? Well, like, I'm just curious, applying.
Yeah. So here's that's actually a really good question. And so I think what matters, what's super important, is the ratio of saturated to unsaturated fat. So like if you're eating, I'm going to say American bacon or American chicken with skin, those are foods that have, you know, more polyunsaturated fat than canola oil. So that's going to throw your ratios off. If you're eating olive oil, if you're eating nuts, if you're eating avocados, I would say to make this work, I would say ditch all of that stuff and get 100% of your fat from really saturated sources, meaning beef, dairy, cocoa butter, and kind of like not, if you can get beef suet, that is a very high saturated source. But
would it be a benefit if it was
a lot of Americans?
If it was grass fed, would it be any benefit?
The grass fed is indeed more saturated than corn finished beef. But anyways, I wanted to follow up. You'd asked a question before, and so to finish the answer to this question, I would say, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to like increase calories, but I would focus really laser level on eliminating sources of unsaturated fat and focusing on really saturated sources. That's what I would do. Coconut oil is like one that's, I'm not sure. It has very little unsaturated fats. So in that sense, it's good. But since all of the fats are shorter chain fats, they're treated a little bit differently. So that's one that I'm not sure. I don't have a strong opinion on coconut oil either way yet. I'm thinking about it. But I wanted to get back to your question before of what happens of cows. And so, yes, beef that's corn fed does have more unsaturated and less saturated fat than grass finished beef. But the difference isn't huge. And the reason for that is that beef actually hydrogenate the fats that you give them. They don't do it. bugs in their rumen do it. So if you feed corn oil to a cow, they will actually saturate it before they store it. But pigs and chickens do not. So if you feed corn to a pig, or even worse, what happens in America today is 30% of our corn crop gets made into ethanol, that we put in our gas tanks. And what happens so corn is a fairly oily grain. It's got about 2 to 3 times the oil of like wheat or barley. And that's why you see corn oil at the store, but you don't see like wheat oil, right? And so all of that corn gets made into ethanol. And so the starch is removed. And so what's left once you remove the starch? It's the protein and the oil. And so they have this thing called dry distillers grains, which is the leftover from ethanol production. And they feed that to the pigs in the Midwest. And so that really concentrates the corn oil, and then they feed that to the pigs. And so pigs fed this distillers grains can have something like 28% of the omega-6 vegetable oils in the fat. So like if you're eating bacon, canola oil has like 16% omega-6 polyunsaturated fat, and your bacon might have almost double that amount if you're buying regular American bacon. And so that's actually my new, just shameless plug here. That's my new project is Firebrand Meats, when I'm I'm actually making a pork that is going to have like less than 5% of the polyunsaturated fats, because pigs and chickens can only get polyunsaturated fats from their feed. Like animals can't make polyunsaturated fats. Like if you don't feed it to them, they won't have it. And so I think that is a really underrated source of people doing keto. And like, you're struggling at weight loss and you're trying to figure out why. I think people don't realize how much unsaturated or polyunsaturated fats they're getting in their bacon, in their chicken, in their eggs even. And it's only because in America, like, it's so funny. It's like, well, you feed pigs and chickens corn. That's what you do, and that is in the mindset of every nutritionist, every feed mill, every farmer. Like I've been trying to make this low polyunsaturated fat pork for years. I mean, I have been making it for years, but it's like, there's so many blocks in the community because the farmer's like, well, can you even feed a pig barley? And it's like, and I'll say things like, this never goes over well. They don't really get it. But I'll be like, well, do you know that pigs were domesticated in Europe and Asia 10,000 years ago, and corn was domesticated in America, and pigs were never fed corn until, 1492 or whatever. It's the first time that pigs met corn. But they don't.
Some of my understanding is that pigs are some of the better animals to run tests on because they maybe run a little similar to a human. Am I correct in that, or am I way off?
Absolutely, yes. And so, and there's some really interesting things here. Like, all right. So, for instance, I don't know if you've heard of Mangalitsa pigs, but it's a European pig. We recently brought them into the U.S. and they're over there. They make something called speck out of them, where you basically I'm familiar with that. Yeah, you dry cure the whole pig into something like prosciutto, but it's like the whole animal, and they hang the whole thing and dry it. And it's pretty cool, admittedly. But those pigs are very interesting. They'll put on a lot of fat. They'll store a lot of fat physiologically. And so what happens in those pigs is they don't make as much saturated fat as like a classic, like a Berkshire hog, which is like a classic meat. They have fantastic meat quality. Berkshire hogs will put on a decent amount of back fat, but not nearly as much as the Mangalitsa. And so it seems like there's potentially this physiological mechanism where Mangalitsas were adapted to put on tons of fat by the fact that they're making unsaturated rather than saturated fats. That's totally that's just a guess that's the fit. But it is true that these pigs that are old fashioned quote lard pigs, they make less saturated fat than the classic kind of meat or bacon hogs, as they call them, which stay leaner. Those leaner pigs put on a much higher proportion of saturated fat. This is similar to if you look at obese humans, they make more of an enzyme. There's an enzyme that converts saturated fats to unsaturated fats. And obese humans tend to make more of this enzyme. And so when obese humans store their dietary fat, it tends to be a lot higher proportion of monounsaturated than in a lean person who's storing a lot more saturated fat. And so this is all kind of like folds into this idea that the saturation level of your fat is this key underlying thing that's controlling body fatness level. And I don't talk about the Mangalitsa thing in the ROS theory of obesity, but I do talk about how obese people do have much more unsaturated fat in their body stores. And I think that's very interesting. But anyway, the other thing is that modern pigs, so in the 90s, they bred for ultra lean pigs. And what happened there was that the pigs actually lost the ability to make their own fat. So this was like a trick that the industry pulled off when pork became like the other white meat. You guys probably remember that. And these pigs like put on very small amounts of fat. But what happens is, since they can't make their own fat, they're actually forced to get it from their diet. And they're mostly fed corn. And so these pigs are genetically just going to put on a lot higher proportion again of the polyunsaturated fats, compared to other more old fashioned pigs. And so over the years, the kind of industry has done all of these things to change the quality of the fat that we're getting from our pigs and from our chickens without even so much as giving us a heads up, right? They just went ahead and did it, and no one's even thinking about it or talking about it. So that's kind of my role in the world.
When it comes to this ROS theory of obesity, why is it important to have starches in there? Because we're talking a lot about the fat, the makeup of the fat, and how important that is. Why is it important to also add a carbohydrate in there, or a starch specifically?
Right. So this is a question I get a lot. It actually has nothing to do with it. Other than that, well, okay, one, the starch, as I said, is a really good vehicle to help you absorb a whole lot of stearic acid. So in that sense, it's important. It's important to the theory of it because I wanted to show that the reason that I was losing weight wasn't that I was on a ketogenic diet. I wanted to show that I was losing weight while eating starch. It was kind of like a handicap, right? I'm like, how can I show that if I lose weight on this diet, it's specifically because of the fat content and not because I'm keto or, something else, right? And so I use the carbohydrate as a way to show that it was indeed the specific fats that were causing the changes I was seeing rather than carbohydrates. But no, there's no reason that the carbohydrate is necessary or perhaps even useful. Although,
makes it more fun.
It makes it more fun. It's also fun because I like eating croissants, and that's cool. But having said that, I can also look at, like, if you look at, there's another article on my blog called "The French Diet in America," or in upstate New York. There's this cool old Cornell paper showing exactly how much fat and potatoes dairy farm and just all farmers in upstate New York were eating around late 1930s, and they look a lot like Parisians in 1970, and they're both cultures are eating tons of starch and saturated fat, and all of them, all the photos, everyone's like stick thin. They're like so thin compared to modern Americans, and so like I'm not I'm not sure. It's possible that there is something about the combination of starch and very saturated fat that does promote leanness, but I'm not ready to state that. I have no idea what the mechanism.
No, maybe it just assists in people eating a little bit less and making them feel more full, making them feel more satisfied. I know for myself, it's still a struggle after I eat a meal. Like I do a lot of like a carnivore style diet, very meat based diet, and after I eat my dinner, I like want the opposite of that. I want something sweet a lot of times.
Right.
And if you found something that pushes some of that back or helps someone to avoid that, then they're going to be on their path to probably being in a better place.
Right. No, absolutely. And there is, I mean, so satiation actually happens, or not the whole process, but a lot of the process is happens in these neurons in your hypothalamus. And again, what they're signaling is these reactive oxygen species. And so it's possible that the combination of some amount of blood sugar rise plus the rise in fat from the meal you just ate together are actually somehow promoting that kind of satiation.
I have a quick question. It's because you've mentioned the French multiple times, and I know nothing about the 1970s, the French in the 1970s,
sure,
right?
Sure.
But kind of think about it from like an average Joe type of a sense. When you look at like Americans here, they have really big portion sizes. I know you mentioned that the French, they ate an average of 3,000 calories a day, which is quite a bit. But there's also like a very different lifestyle here as far as being sedentary is concerned, as far as transportation is concerned, being on your feet. And I'm just curious, like I'm assuming you probably looked into that, but does none of that play a role in terms of the way the French looked eating that many calories back then versus the way Americans are eating excessive calories here, but having a different type of lifestyle? Or was the lifestyle relatively similar?
So, I mean, that's a question that I get a lot, of course. And I tend to think about it like, I know that in my own life and my own experience, like, there's been times in my life when I'll be like, you know what? I need to lose weight. I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to start jogging. I'm going to get really active. And I've never seen a bit of weight loss from those kinds of activities. But I know that when I change my diet, I can affect my weight loss dramatically. So that's my personal bias, is that like, I find that diet is 10 times as effective for controlling weight than is physical activity. And I think there's a lot of sort of research papers which also say that, exercise alone isn't very helpful. But in making that comparison, I would think about like a New Yorker, like people who live in the city of New York. They're also very active. I mean, you use the subway, but the subway's 5 blocks from your house, and it's 5 long city blocks from your work. So, I think I think people in New York are quite physically active, like you're forced to be. And yet there's plenty of obese New Yorkers, you know what I mean? Like it somehow hasn't solved the problem. And so, and in terms of like portion sizes, I think that, and this again goes back to hyperlipid. It's like, if you're eating a lot of unsaturated fats, you never generate enough of these reactive oxygen species, which is like the off switch for a cell. So a cell, like a fat cell specifically, can either be in like the mode where it's taking in energy, or it can be in the mode where it's releasing energy, right? And so the idea of the ROS theory of obesity is that as long as you're eating highly saturated fats, your cells hit that off switch pretty quick, because of the way that the fats are oxidized in the mitochondria. But if you're eating a lot of unsaturated fats, you can't generate the reactive oxygen species, which are in fact the signal for the whole thing. That's on a basic level, the way that your cells know whether or not they're digesting fat or starch is based on the amount of these reactive oxygen species that are being generated. And when you eat polyunsaturated fats, that switch is broken. Your cell doesn't know that it's eating fat. It thinks it's eating carbohydrate, but yet it's actually eating fat because you're not producing the signal. And that sort of at a very fundamental low level is how the polyunsaturated fat affects the whole metabolism. And so if you think about an American eating a huge portion size, especially at restaurants, everything in a restaurant is dripping in soybean oil, like literally. It's like you go to a diner, you order eggs. What do they put on the griddle? They put soybean oil. The bacon is also loaded with polyunsaturated fats. The French fries are fried in vegetable oil. And so you can shovel down these huge portions because your cells never hit that off signal. If your fat ratio is too unsaturated, that's what I think. And like, I'll tell you what, when I switch over to that like stearic acid heavy diet, I mean, you just, even though I'm eating like French fries or pancakes, it's like, you just hit a hard stop a while in. You're just like, wow, I can't even finish this plate of French fries, which that never happens at a diner, right? Where the French fries are fried in like soybean oil. And so I really think there's something to this. It's kind of the difference in how your body responds to, the stearic acid French fries versus the diner French fries. It's a whole different ball game. It's kind of crazy. That's been what I've found.
What about, because you mentioned in France that they were all, thin. What about muscle retention? Because here on this podcast, that's kind of what we're preaching, high protein diets, protein leveraging and stuff. And, we just really at the end of the day want to get jacked. So with the stearic acid, right, does it help aid that, or is it just mainly focusing on fat loss?
Well, so, I mean, I was focusing on fat loss. I'm not a lifter, but I play basketball. And one thing I noticed was that if I ate a meal the night before with a lot of this stearic acid, the next day I would have all this energy. I mean, just like I'm like, wow, it's like I hit the on switch, and I was playing great. And I was like, literally in my weekly basketball game, my friend was like, what are you doing? Like, how are you just like shredding it all of a sudden? And I was like, I don't know. I'm eating all the stearic acid and I feel like explosive. Somebody on I think it's on the comments to my website, mentioned something about an old study that stearic acid can actually boost hormone levels. But I haven't looked into that, or boost testosterone levels. I haven't looked into that. So it's like, I'm way out on a limb of things that I don't really know about here and talking about that. But I did feel like on the Croissant diet, I felt like I got stronger. And that was not expected. That's not why I did it. It's a really interesting thing.
What's the main blowback you get from this? Have you had people that are like, oh man, I tried it and they're taking a crap on some of the stuff that you're saying? What's some of the negative or some of the blowback you might be getting?
So, I mean, sure. So everyone, I've had people try it and with widely varying results. I've had people say, I tried this and upon reintroducing carbohydrates, I immediately gained 6 or 7 pounds and an inch on my waist. And obviously they're not going to continue doing it. I've had other people who have said, this is great. I love eating this way. And I've lost 5 inches off my waist. And I've had people say, I tried it and the food was really good. And I didn't gain any weight, but I didn't lose any weight. And I was trying to lose weight. So, I'm going to try something else. And I don't think, like I say, I'm not really advocating to live on croissants. I'm just trying to point out that I think the types of fats we eat are super crucial and an underrated sort of underexplored area.
Do you maybe have a theory that you could potentially eat a little bit more in this way? Like what we know about protein, it seems like at this point we can kind of say that protein shouldn't count as, 4 calories per gram any longer. It should be more like 1 or 2. So potentially you could, if you were going to overeat on anything, it would be protein, and it maybe wouldn't even count against you in terms of overeating. Would you say maybe something similar with this stearic acid theory, and maybe maybe somebody can eat, I don't know, 5% more, 10% more, and kind of like quote unquote get away with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I really do think there's something to this idea of mitochondrial uncoupling, and that if you get enough, if your cells are burning enough of the saturated fat, that it takes you into this this place where your mitochondria are literally just flaring off calories. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties.
Are you familiar with a compound called DNP? Have you ever heard of that before?
I'm not. Others did not play.
Yeah. You should maybe look it up, because the way that it works, it's a like pool chemical. I think it's actually very dangerous, but people don't care. They'll use anything as a diet drug, right? This is not recommended by any means, but this does raise your body temperature up, and it works through exactly what you're talking about. From what I recall, it works through mitochondrial uncoupling. From what I remember.
Don't people get hot?
People get very hot. And people have died from it. So again, caution. I'm not recommending this. This is an illegal compound to ingest into your body. But it does raise body temperature, and people report that they lose, like, I want to say almost like a half a pound of fat a day or something. It's something wild. So it might be something to look into, because it might give more to your theory a little bit.
Right. No, that's very interesting. And that's literally exactly the same thing. Like, I've had a lot, I don't necessarily feel hot when I eat it, but I have had a lot of people who've tried it and be like, yeah, I heat up when I eat this. Like, so I think that mechanism is real. I do. And it's kind of cool.
So stearic acid is mild DNP.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You're raising your own pig. So it sounds to me like what I'm getting from this podcast more so than anything else is that not only, that people say you are what you eat, but it sounds like it goes deeper. It's you are what you eat, but then on top of it, whatever that eats is also really important. And maybe one of the reasons why a carnivore diet works so well is because I don't want to say a cow can eat anything, but a cow seems to kind of give us a somewhat protected form of fats. Do you think that that's true? Like even when it's not fed grass?
I think that's absolutely true. The cow, or ruminants in general, have this ability to saturate their fats. And so, and you see in the carnivore community, not everyone, but mostly people are eating beef. And so I'm trying to bring a sort of ideal bacon into the world that basically has the same fat composition as beef fat. And we can do that. We can totally make bacon that has the exact same, it'll taste just like regular bacon, but it'll have the quality of beef fat. So that's the whole thing, so that carnivores can have a little more variety in their diet without worrying about getting a ton of the polyunsaturated fats. Because the polyunsaturated fats, not only, I'm talking about one very specific, how they affect energy metabolism, but they also, they're very prone to oxidation. They're involved in all kinds of inflammatory pathways. So like, eating a lot of polyunsaturated fat can also lead to inflammation, and there's tons of information on the web. If you search for PUFA, P-U-F-A, and inflammation, you'll find all kinds of articles, or PUFA and cancer is a big suspected connection.
Does this include fish oil as well?
Not necessarily.
Aren't they polyunsaturated fats, or no?
Well, they are. Okay. And so there's two main I don't know. There's two main kinds of polyunsaturated fats. There's what are called the omega-6 and the omega-3.
Oh, got it.
And fish oils are the omega-3, and the plant oils are the omega-6. And what's happened is, in our diets, those omega-6 plant oils have become like they're just in everything. I mean, pick up any package and you see soybean oil in there, and we feed it to our pigs and we feed it to the chickens, right? And so what's happened is, they think that traditional diets, you might have gotten like 2 grams of omega-6 fats for every 1 gram of omega-3 fats. Now it's like you're getting 15 grams of omega-6 fats for every 1 gram of omega-3 fats. And so one of the things I'm trying to do with the pork is have a balance of, maybe it'll be 3-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 rather than modern pork, which might be 20-to-1, because the omega-3 and the omega-6 kind of have like pathways that oppose each other. It's like one enzyme works on both of, it's like it works on both the omega-6 and the omega-3 fats. So what happens is if you overload omega-6, that enzyme just gets overwhelmed doing that, and the omega-3 fats don't get like properly utilized in the pathways that they need to get utilized in. So that's another role. And those, the downstream products of omega-6 and omega-3 fats are the prostaglandins. And those are very involved in inflammation and inflammatory pathways. And so when you eat a lot of omega-6 fats, you're making a lot of prostaglandins, and a lot of those are pro-inflammatory. And it's a super complex science of all that stuff. And I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but, I think there's a lot of reasons to avoid the omega-6 fats other than just this effect on metabolism.
Do we have to make our own croissants, or can we just like pick them up from Starbucks or something like that?
Well, that's another question people ask. I would recommend making your own. This is the crazy thing in America is like even a lot of the baked goods, which would be traditional baked goods, which would be made with butter. If you look at a croissant in America, it's like, oh, look, they put soybean oil in there too. Mm-hmm. There are a couple brands, like I think there's a Costco one that is just purely a butter croissant. But so there's a couple out there, but there's not. But they're few and far between. You got to really read the labels, and because a lot of them have soybean oil in it.
I'm actually
can't really try it.
I'm actually going to give some of these recommendations a shot. I'm going to give some of this a try and like put it into practice so that the people that listen to the show can kind of follow along, So what other recipes you got you got a croissant, and then like what other types of things? Like what if I just made like a sourdough bread at home and just threw some butter on it or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that would be good. And I think that the effect, like I think for everybody, like how saturated the fat that you need to eat to like actually try to like force weight loss is going to depend on a lot of things. One, it's going to depend on how saturated your body fat is, because at any time, mitochondria are consuming a blend of like the dietary fat that you just ate plus your stored fat. And so it's like, if you've got a lot of stored polyunsaturates, you might have to consume a really highly saturated fat to get this to work. You know what I mean? Or maybe not even to work, but, so I guess all I'm saying is, your mileage may vary. But I would say stick to, as butter's pretty saturated. The stuff that I make, the fire in a bottle stuff is like way more saturated even than butter though. But it's waxier, it's like, but here's the thing I was doing at the end is I was making these pancakes. Croissants are fun, but they're a lot of work. And so I got tired of making croissants, and I just started making pancakes and frying that in the butter that was enhanced with the stearic acid. And wow, pancakes can absorb a tremendous amount of fat. It's amazing. And so I was eating these like stacks of pancakes, which were just like, I mean, they would absorb, like you could absorb a whole stick of butter into like 2 or 3 pancakes with the extra stearic acid. I was eating those, and I was continuing to lose weight on those, but that was like a giant amount of fat. And I was, and inches were still coming off. And pounds.
Is there anything to be cautious with? Like if we cook, if you cook the butter at too high of a temperature or something like, if you're going to, cook something in butter, should be careful of how high the temperature is and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to, the good news is that out of all the fats, the ones that are not going to oxidize are the saturated fats. You know what I mean? Like when you get in trouble with like burning oils, it's the polyunsaturated fats are the ones that are oxidizing and forming the cyclic, all the weird, nasty chemicals. So you can use this with fairly high heat. There's not a lot of, the percentage of the polyunsaturated fats in that is down in the like 2 to 3% range. So, you don't want to overburn any fat, but you can cook with fairly high temperatures with this. I was doing a lot of frying.
Awesome. What other projects you have coming up? You have anything specific coming up? And do you do some talking, on this subject? Have you, done seminars or anything like that and trying to teach other people, or is it mainly blog type stuff?
Mostly I'm working on my blog, and I'm working on the Firebrand meats. I do have some podcasts coming up. I'm going to go on Ben Greenfield.
Cool.
And Superhuman Radio, I think. But, I'm really focusing on the Firebrand meats aspect because I do think we need a source of chicken and pork that aren't all loaded with polyunsaturated fats. I think that would be a great thing. Right now, you almost can't find that because even, unfortunately, even like organic producers or pastured producers, it's really hard to find protein sources for organic that aren't roasted soybeans. And so you end up feeding full fat roasted soybeans to the pigs and the chickens. And so I'm just that's my big project right now is Firebrand Meats. We're doing what I call a CSA, and that's an important concept. It stands for Community Supported Agriculture. That's an idea that started in Japan in the, 1960s or 70s. And a woman named Elizabeth Henderson, actually, who was my country neighbor here in upstate New York, popularized the term here in the U.S. And the idea is that you want to produce a specific product. You don't necessarily have the capital to make it. And so you ask the customers to basically, buy a share in the beginning of the season,
like a co-op
at the end of the year. It's like a co-op, and it's a little bit like it's sort of like preceded ideas like Kickstarter campaigns. You know what I mean? It's like we're all going to buy a share, and then at the end of the year, we all, we get the product, right? And so I'm trying to get enough capital together to actually make this product. It's definitely a labor of love. Any meat project is a ton of work, and it's not a high margin product to make, but I really want to make it. I mean, I want to have it myself. That's really kind of like what I'm doing right now.
Great. Is there any?
But I'm gonna keep blogging and writing, and I am actually gonna try to do a. Actually, here's a cool experiment that I want to do. I want to. I'm gonna try to do this like 8-day dietary trial, and I'm gonna make. It's a little tricky because I want to do it with a. I want to be able to test my resting metabolic rate. And I don't have a way to do that right now. So I'm hoping there are some like mobile units out there. So I'm hoping that like, I know PNOE makes one. So I'm going to see if I can get like a test from them and maybe help get their name out there. And I also want to do my blood work. I want to take like, I'm going to eat like a huge stearic acid meal one night, do my blood panel in the morning, test insulin, test blood sugar, test ketones, test free fatty acids, chylomicrons, all the things, and then do the stearic acid feast and then retest the next morning and see how that, did my metabolic rate change? Do I have more energy available in the form of like free fatty acids as a result of consuming the stearic acid? How does that affect my hunger? And then try it the next night with like maybe the same meal but like cooked in olive oil, and see how that changes with a really unsaturated fat. But it's like, but I want to do it. I'd really like to do it right and do it like, and basically do like a 48-hour cycle based off each meal and repeat it twice for each one. So that's like an 8-day trial. But I also, it's tricky because in New York State, we can't just go to a lab and do a blood test. It's actually illegal. So I have to go to like I mean, you can do it with a prescription from your doctor, but you can't just walk in and say, hey, I want to get my, cholesterol levels read. So I have to go to Pennsylvania to pull this off. So I'm going to have to like hole up, I guess, in a hotel room with like one of those like little mini kitchenettes and live next to the testing lab for like 8
go back and forth
in some random hotel in Pennsylvania. So that's going to be I don't know. I'm still trying to work out all the logistics. And what I really need is one of the metabolic testing machines. So that's like my big thing that I like want to do from like a testing this diet perspective, but it's a little, I'm working on it.
Complicated, yeah. Hey, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you? Where do you want to kind of direct people towards to find out more information about you?
Sure. So my blog is called fireinabottle.net. Obviously, the Croissant diet is like where a lot of people start, but I would recommend the ROS theory of obesity. That really is the background science. You should check out the article, Disastrous Trends in American Bacon. That's the article where I talk about sort of this history of why our pork has gone up in polyunsaturated fats. And check out Firebrand Meats. That is where the pork CSA shares are available. I hope you guys want to buy some ideal pork that's not full of vegetable oil. And I'm hoping a lot of you sign up because I really want to make this project happen. I'm excited about it. So
are there any pork products you can direct people to at the moment that are like kind of easy to get?
Honestly, I don't really have a lot of good sources right now of like people, it's so few. The livestock feeding industry is so incredibly uncreative. It's so frustrating. And I can't, it's really hard. I have a couple really good sources now of where I can get feeds, and I know I can get the right feeds and I can make this product, but it's really hard. I would like in the future to have a directory of, local farms producing things the right way. And I think that's another upcoming project, but I'm not quite there yet. Do I have time to tell a quick funny story?
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
So this was like 15 years ago when I was just starting to raise pigs. I called this local feed mill, and I knew that, traditional European pork was like barley finished and it was firmer, and US pork was actually has always sold at a discount in European markets because the Europeans considered it soft and inferior because of the corn oil content. And so anyway, I was trying to find this grain called triticale, which is a cross between wheat and rye. It's got good protein and it's very low in fat, and it would be a good base of a pig diet. And so I called this local feed mill. Triticale is also used for like people grow it for hay. So it's like a seed crop. And I called this feed mill and I was like, yeah, I was wondering if you'd be interested in making a triticale based pig diet for me. And the woman on the phone said, well, we sell feed, not seed. And I was like, okay, no, I mean, I understand that. But what I'm saying is I'm going to feed this to my pigs. It's going to be a feed. I just, but I want to use triticale instead of corn. And she just said, feed, not seed. I was like, okay, I can see this conversation is going nowhere. And I hung up. I mean, it's like that level of trying to get farms to do it. And farms are like, well, can you really raise pigs without corn? It's like the level of, and the nutritionists, forget about it. They know what they were taught in school, and that's that pigs and chickens eat corn, and that's it.
I thought pigs ate anything. I thought that's why they're pigs.
That is absolutely what I think. There's all, like back in the day in the South, when they would harvest the sweet potatoes, you would turn the pigs into the sweet potato field, and they would eat all of the sweet potatoes you missed, and they would fatten up that way, and you'd send them to market. And that's a really nice firm fat, because there's almost no fat in a sweet potato. So that's a good way to make really nice firm pork fat, which, would be cool to do too, but probably not super cost effective today. So
thanks again for your time, Brad. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks, guys.
You.
See ya.
The croissant diet. I love it. I love what he said about pancakes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We got to go make some pancakes. A stick of butter per pancake.
Mm-hmm. that pancake seems like the I don't know, just the juicy, not juicy. Juicy's not the right word. What's a good pancake? It's thick.
Yeah,
thick. It seems like a really thick and heavy.
Yeah, like it weighs.
Yes, those are good pancakes. When
that's
they're too fluffy, they're weak.
That's how you know it's a good cookie too. When you pick up like a tray of cookies and someone just made them and they're like super heavy, like you almost drop to the floor because it's got so much butter in it.
It's super heavy, but when you bite into it, it's like really gooey.
It's really not a cookie. It's like a stick of butter.
It really is like that. All butter cookies from Rayleigh's are the best.
Oh, and then pancakes, like they absorb everything. Just like he said, he's like they can absorb a whole stick of butter. It's like, no, they can, and they're delicious.
Oh God, I want some pancakes. I really do. But I think what he was saying was making sense, because like Americans were like demonizing saturated fat in the 80s and 90s, and then you just started seeing a lot of people get really, really fat, right?
Right.
So he was pretty much saying, bring saturated fat as your main fat source in your diet, which is, even though we don't say that specifically, in terms of the way we eat, that's kind of that's the way you're eating right now, right?
Yeah, saturated fat and protein.
That's how I'm eating too.
And then if you have room for a couple other things, go for it.
Yeah. And
I also think that if the percentage of those other things that you're eating is low, it almost doesn't matter what those other things are. It just tends to matter a lot less. If you, let's say every third day you eat as many bowls of cereal as you want, or something like that. You knock off a box of cereal, or you knock off a good amount of like ice cream. I think if that's making up, again, a small percentage of what you normally do, you eat 3 or 4 meals every single day, and 1 meal out of every 20 or something is kind of whatever. You're going to be satisfied. You'll be full because you're having the protein, you're having the fat.
Yeah.
And what I got from this podcast more so than anything is just to, I like bacon and sausage and stuff, but like, I really don't like it that much. I just won't eat it anymore.
Yeah.
Because like, why bother with it? Why, and again, it's how much, it's the dose, so I could still have it here and there. If it's in something, I'm not going to freak out about it, but I want to kind of test his theory a little bit. And I'm not going to like switch over to like eating croissants all the time, but last night I ate a big steak and had a baked potato with it, and it was delicious. And I've been kind of doing some of that anyway, but the carbohydrate is like the afterthought. It's like the last thing for me, kind of.
The one thing I was, what he was saying about the French did make a lot of sense though, because they probably didn't eat a crazy amount of processed carbohydrates, which again, super popular here, excessive amounts of processed carbohydrates. They ate a lot of saturated fats. The lifestyle thing though is still in the back of my head, because it's not exercise. It's like what they call that NEAT aspect.
100%.
They're not exercising. They're just moving way more. You know what I mean? Moving way more, not eating a crazy amount of processed carbohydrates. It makes sense why they were that way. And I think the lifestyle does play a role. But the saturated fats also play a massive role too.
Obesity is a tricky subject. It's a tricky thing. There's a lot of a mental side of it. There's sometimes with people that are very, very heavy, there's like there's psychological damage somewhere in their history.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't recognize that. I think sometimes the person that is heavy may not even recognize what a huge problem, something that happened in their childhood or something that they just haven't maybe really dealt with. And that's a side of nutrition that just probably doesn't come to the surface enough. That people have these problems that they've never gone back and fixed. And so every time they try a diet, they lose 20, they lose 20, they gain 20, they gain 30, they lose, they go back and forth and they kind of yo-yo diet, but they haven't really ever fixed the main root cause of the problem. And it might sound funny in some way, but like they're just really hurting inside. And they don't know how to express it, or they haven't gone back and figured out a way past that yet. And so when things are going good, you tend to throw a lot of chaos back into your life because that's what you were maybe brought up with, or that's what you experienced in a relationship somewhere along the lines. And so that extra noise, you're expecting that. Maybe you don't think you're worthy of being thin. Maybe you don't think you're worthy of looking better or feeling better. And when you start to feel better for multiple days, you're like, the shit's going to hit the fan. The shit's going to hit the fan. Something bad's going to happen. And you start to go back to your old ways. And it's a very vicious cycle. But in the end, it almost always, there are some conditions that people might have, but it almost always comes down to, you got to figure out a way to eat less. I mean, you have to figure out a way to like fit, and I don't count calories, but again, I've mentioned this many times on this show. Just because I don't count them doesn't mean that they don't count. I also, just because I don't count them doesn't mean that I don't account for them. I know what I'm doing when I see the food, I see the portion size. I do a little bit of an eye for an eye type of thing with my nutrition, but I try to have a healthy relationship with that and not come in and like, oh, I ate ice cream last night, so I'm going to destroy myself in the gym. It's more like I've actually learned to look at it in a more positive way of saying, like, I ate that food for extra fuel, and that food's going to propel me forward tomorrow, or I'm going to feel stronger for squats tomorrow. It's almost like a little lie that I tell myself to allow for that meal, but also too, sometimes truthfully, you just need it. Sometimes you just need the surplus of calories. I think what he's saying and what we see from so many people is that he's kind of falling upon something that may be effective. It may work pretty well, but it's also probably not a means to an end. Like, you probably wouldn't ride out that diet forever. And I would imagine that it probably just wouldn't work for a very long time. That could also be the case with a keto diet. You heard him say he used keto diet many times in the past. It didn't have the same effectiveness when he tried to come back to it when he was a little older. And, I've noticed personally myself with certain diets, it's like when I stop them and bring them back, just like with training, when you bring in an old method or bring in a new method, you end up having a great response to it, because your body kind of gets used to it. And it's not saying that eating less calories isn't always effective, but if you do it for a long time, we know that your body's like, hey, like, this is the end of the line. We're not going to lose weight anymore. Even if you just stop eating completely for a few days, we know that can kind of slow down the need that it automatically, think about how crazy it is. Mm-hmm. Your body will auto correct itself. Your body will say, hey, that fidgeting that you do with your leg or that twirl under the pen, we're going to shut that down because you're not giving us enough food. Yeah. That's wild to think about.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious what your thoughts are about this because, I've done carnivore a bit in the past. I would say there are certain days where I do carnivore where I only eat meat, right? But then there are certain days where I eat quite a bit of meat, quite a bit of fat. There's certain days where I eat some carbs, some fats, some protein. And it's not like I don't stick to one thing. And I feel like when you get an understanding of like how you can eat, you like I feel like you're doing the same thing too. Like there are certain days where you're only eating meat. There are certain days where you have some potatoes in your food.
I went like 2 days in a row and I was like, I haven't eaten any carbs in a while. I didn't notice it. Yeah. I noticed it because when I was eating dinner, I was like, oh, I kind of feel like eating a little bit more than what I had on my plate. And I was like, well, I don't have a vegetable on my plate, which I don't really normally eat vegetables that much anyway. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, oh, it kind of would have been nice to have like a potato. So then last night I had steak and a potato. So it's like, I'm not really trying to strategically make sure that there's a carbohydrate in there, but sometimes I am. So like I went for a run the other day. I was like, the last meal I had was at 1. I'm going to run at like 5. And it was like I don't know, it was like 3 or 3:30. I was like, I'm going to eat an apple and have a protein shake. I didn't really even want it, but I was just like, I think it will be beneficial for me to have that, because I don't want to like run and then be thinking about food and kind of be worn out. The sun's out and stuff like that. I'm thinking like hydration and just kind of overall feeling. I wanted to be able to put in a good effort when I went and ran. And when I went to run, you know, as I kind of warmed up and as I started feeling better, I was like, oh, I feel good. It felt like it gave me a little extra, you know, burst of energy. And that's kind of how I'm measuring it. But I'm not like, you know, oh, because I did this activity, I need 300 grams of carbs.
Yeah,
you know, I'm not really like, you know, doing anything like that.
I think that's a good place for people of the show to try to get to. Like, if you're using carnivore right now to lose weight, it's working, stick to it. If you're using keto right now, it's working, stick to it. When you get close to your goal, or when you get to your goal, experiment a little bit. Don't like, I mean, if you really feel, you know, bad when you eat potatoes, okay, maybe stay away from a potato if it makes you like, you know, if it gets you emotionally or something, but test things out a little bit. Cause I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you want to be able to have a little bit of freedom with your eating while not eating like an asshole. You know, you want to be able to have some variability without it getting to you. So you have a good relationship with food and it doesn't feel bad when you go and eat a slice of pizza with your family.
What do you think, Andrew?
Very interesting. And it really just comes back to like what you guys are saying. But to me, it seemed like, you know, just adding this stearic acid to an already, you know, kind of almost fat adapted diet is just really going to make you more satiated. So you're not going to want to eat more. So you eat less, calories are going to come down. And that's just, I mean, calories in, calories out, whatever you want to call it. It's just pretty straightforward. It, you know, I know even he said it, you know, labeling it the croissant diet was just to really like kind of not trigger people, but to get some attention. But he understood that like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, you know, this just kept me fuller, longer, better than anything else I had ever tried. And I think he missed a huge marketing opportunity because he calls it fire in a bottle. He should have definitely called it stoic acid because it's stearic acid. That's just me thinking outside the bottle.
Well,
but yeah,
could message him that.
Yeah.
Or we could, yeah.
Because every time like they, I was thinking about it, even when writing down notes, I wrote stoic acid on accident.
That's
like,
dope.
oh, like that's perfect.
Stoic acid.
Yeah, because think about it, it keeps you all
stoic.
Yeah.
I like it.
Not thinking about food all day.
Yeah, and there's a lot of hormonal things that can happen in your body when you start to like learn how to eat less. You know, I think something to kind of keep in mind is that you know, everybody, well, not everybody, most people are born with like full access to everything they need their body to do in most cases, especially when it comes to your metabolism. But you can kind of just think of like, there's things that we do to interrupt that. And there's things that we do to ourselves that throw that way off. And some of that could just be training like way too hard. Like we need strenuous exercise. We were probably designed to, you know, carry stuff. We were designed to like, you know, shovel ditches and like do all kinds of different stuff. Right. And, you know, get our own food and hunt and things like that. But then like how much above and beyond, you know, like a primal man wouldn't go out for like a run. Like there would just be, it would actually be unless we were kind of playing around and we wanted to compete with each other because we're similar age and we're in
going
a similar
after a woman.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, yeah, showing off in front of people at an event, games, right? Those are things that people did, and those things are worth the cost of calories. And then also too, like if we're trying to prove our worth, you know, how we can hunt, in comparison to other people around, like, so then there would be some reasons for some stuff like that. But you're not gonna, you know, a primal man's not gonna, you know, wake up at 4 a.m, you know, have something wake them up at 4 a.m, an alarm clock or something, and go run 5 miles. We're not going to go run 5 miles together. Yeah. And if we did, like, and we were young, like people would be like, what the fuck, you're going to die. Because like, we don't have the energy to like, you know, what are you doing? And if you were running to an area or walking to an area, that would be different. But, you get this idea that, you know, today's exercise, which I have called artificial exercise, is just kind of fill in those gaps because we don't need to do any of that stuff anymore. And I think one piece that's missing from Brad's content, and it was good that he was like, I don't really know a ton about that, and he did say he didn't know a lot of times, and I think that's helpful. But yeah, he is kind of missing some of the exercise component, and it would be cool if more people kind of checked out his website and played around with some of the message that he had from today, so that we can gather more information. I don't think that anything that he said is harmful in any way. The one thing I would maybe suggest is that, in trying something like this, understand that no one is trying to give you permission to just eat whatever you want, and no one is trying to give you permission to eat as much as you want. Mm-hmm. So I think Nsima brought up a really good point where he was like, hey, I eat 100 grams of fat already. Do I just eat an additional 100? And Brad, basically said, I'm not 100% sure, but he said it would be a good idea to have that in consideration. Maybe go halfway, maybe go in the middle, or maybe just experiment to see if there's a difference. I think the main thing, that I got from it was just to try to steer more clear of the polyunsaturated fats and lean in a little bit harder into the things that have stearic acid. I'm just going to try for the next couple of days just to, have a little bit more butter. And I like potatoes a lot, so I might have a little bit more potato or a little bit more rice. I might try to make some bread at home, like my sister-in-law, April. She's been making some sourdough at home, and it's it makes the whole house smell amazing. Oh. And, as long as you're not, if you were eating the sourdough, like you do at a restaurant, they put the bread on the table, and then it doesn't leave room for your main course, then you're making a huge mistake, I think, because your main course almost always has a good protein source. I think not that the order matters too much, but I know that you want to make sure that you can get your protein in. And if you eat the bread or eat a sandwich midday, and that sacrifices your ability to eat protein later on, I think you might be making a big mistake.
Yeah, I feel like a heavy stearic acid croissant would be an awesome thing to have pre-workout.
Well, I wonder what stearic acid even tastes like.
That might be a little too much. That might be a little
too heavy.
It's kind of heavy.
Fats before workouts can be kind of hard.
That is true. I'm just thinking, I don't know. I just want croissant.
What does it taste like though? It doesn't taste like butter. Does it? I should have.
I love that he got a bunch of stearic acid himself.
Pure shit. Pure stearic.
I'm imagining that it probably might burn a little bit. Ooh. Just because of the name, I'm trying to think.
When he said people said that they were getting hot, I was just like,
but butter doesn't have any sort of burn flavor to it. If you were just to have straight up olive oil, I wonder if it's maybe something similar to that. That's got olive oil tastes really good on stuff, but having a spoonful of olive oil is not the greatest tasting thing. Or you ever try flaxseed oil before? That kind of has,
I've used it.
That has a little bit of a burn to it, it's not like it's disgusting or anything, but just a little burn in the back of the throat. I'm imagining that this probably does something similar.
I wonder if you could even Google stearic acid and buy it on Amazon. But
yeah,
these pure chemicals,
he sells it.
Oh yeah, he does have his fire in a bottle.
Yeah.
Interesting too. It kind of looks like coconut oil. Interesting that you can that there's a study that he talked about with shakes. Using 24 or 28 grams of it in a shake is very interesting. But yeah, the uncoupling theory, the mitochondria type stuff, that was interesting. And the kind of, it may be potentially turning on your body's ability to release some fat cells or release some fat storage is definitely really interesting. I mean, if there's any truth to that, that could be, these things can be really helpful. So, if he has found something and he's, pointing to a subject that people haven't really looked into enough before, then maybe he found something that's really worthwhile.
Well, I mean, let's look at this real quick. When people talk about, for example, the paleo diet, when you look at the fats that are within the paleo diet, they're mainly saturated fats, right? Or am I wrong?
No, you're right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like a lot of these diets have kind of been on this, even though they may have not been saying that specifically, or that it's not the main point of the diet. This seems to be the main concept of what he's talking about here. That mitochondrial uncoupling, mainly saturated fats, using stearic acid, being highly satiated. But that seems to also be a theme within when people talk about good keto, like when you see people talking about like healthy eating with keto, it's mainly saturated fats. You know, when you guys talk about carnivore, it's mainly saturated fats. Right. So it's like, these are all the things that we're already like a lot of people are already talking about, but not in that way. And it's good to understand it in the way that he's speaking about it.
Yeah, I love that. I think also too, the other factor, and we've talked about this quite a bit on the show too, when people come from the side of if it fits your macros, or they come from the side of flexible dieting, what's the most appealing thing? What's the sexy thing of those diets is, the Pop-Tart, right? Like people, talk about you get to eat a Pop-Tart, and then some people kind of get overboard with it and say, hey, that's not the point of the diet, is to, make room for Pop-Tarts necessarily. But it is a diet that has been effective for a lot of people. People have been able to use it with great success. Some of the people that you follow on social media that have the best physiques that you've ever seen, they utilize similar principles where they count their calories, they pay attention to their caloric intake, and occasionally they will make room for something that they really enjoy. And if you think about, you're trying to sell people on this idea of like obesity can be defeated, or obesity can be, maybe cured might be a word, or it could be something that we can attack in a slightly easier fashion, because I didn't know if you knew this, but you can actually eat like this as well. And then you have opportunities to eat, occasionally have a grilled cheese sandwich, or have, some sourdough bread, or have a croissant. Mm-hmm. It's like, whoa, it's just a new level of knowledge to where you were like, oh, I have a total misunderstanding of nutrition. I thought that I had to be on this strict protocol for 75 days straight, where I train twice a day and I'm just, going hard in the paint, and there's no other way to do it. And I'm, a piece of crap because I got these bad habits and I need these X amount of days before I break those habits. And you really end up, in a bad spot with some bad dialogue. But it's like, well, we can utilize some theories from intermittent fasting. We can utilize some theories of protein leveraging. We can utilize some theories from bodybuilding. We can utilize some theories from if it fits your macros. We can utilize some theories from potentially something like this. And now you end up, explaining to your mother or your uncle. You can say, hey, here's the options. We can go with the diet that kind of looks like this. Every couple days, you can kind of mix in what you want, or you can mix in what you want every day. But here's the price that you'll pay for that. Like there's always a trade-off. There's no easy way to the top. You're always going to have to fight for it. But maybe you can find a path where the fight is just less for you. And for one person, that might be a low carb diet. For another person, that might be a higher carb diet. For another person, maybe that's they go hard for 2 weeks and they cheat, Saturday and Sunday, whatever it might be. And it just is, let's give people thousands of options on how to lose fat, and maybe we can help people better. Yeah.
And wine fasting.
Yeah, he loved wine, huh?
Andy might like that.
I know. Yeah. She would love that. Yeah, intermittent wine fasting.
We needed to ask to explain that.
Yeah, she asked me if I wanted a drink the other day, and I was like, I haven't eaten anything all day. She's like, so?
She's already doing it.
I'm like, I'm gonna get hammered. I'm like, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't. Out of nowhere I don't.
Oh shit, that's funny.
I mean, I don't mind having like a glass, with dinner, or having a glass kind of before dinner, but. When it's 4 p.m. and I haven't eaten anything yet the whole day, and I worked out and stuff, I'm like, that's going to just annihilate me.
Yo, that's great. 4 p.m. Want a glass of wine?
Yeah.
I love it.
Cool. Yeah, she doesn't really need a reason.
That's good.
Appreciate having Brad on the show. That was awesome. Hopefully you guys are, receiving this stuff with an open mind, because it is different. And hopefully some of what he said today didn't trigger you too much, make you lose your mind. But again, I think we're just trying to help people. We're trying to expose stuff. And I actually think that this topic isn't going to go away. I think we're going to see a lot more of this. And he's getting on some other big podcasts coming up. And I think that if he might not be the guy to champion it. Maybe there's other people involved as well, but you're going to hear it from multiple people. And, Ron, again, is the one who kind of brought this to my attention. And if it's got his attention, I think it's going to certainly grab other people's attention. Andrew, take us on out of here, buddy.
Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. Thank you, Piedmontese, for sponsoring this episode. For more information on them, please check the show notes and the video description down below. Please make sure you're following the podcast at Mark Bell's Power Project on Instagram, at MB Power Project on Twitter. We're also on LinkedIn, Facebook, and, of course, YouTube. My Instagram is at I am Andrew Z. And Nsima, where you be?
Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, and Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter. Mark?
At Mark Smelly Bell on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Strength is never weakness. Weakness never strength. Catch y'all later. Bye.